It's Fill Your Plate Now, where every bite brings you closer to the farm gate and further from what's unhealthy. Now here's your hosts, Julie and Tammy, helping you live well by filling your plate well.
Well, we have a great episode today, Julie. I'm so excited for it.
I'm excited about this one, especially because of the topic.
Well,
it'll be good for you and me.
Definitely will. My grandmother used to say there's only two things you have to do in life, pay taxes and get older. And today we're going to talk about the one related to nutrition, getting older healthfully.
Yes.
But, you know, it's interesting because really in your 30s on, your body does start aging. And in time, you know, your memory has a little more trouble. You may lose muscle mass, bone mass, and you know that progresses, of course, all the way through life. But it's not all gloom and doom.
Yes.
We do have someone with us today who's an expert on healthful aging and really being able to maintain your fitness level and eat healthy. I mean, your physiological age does not have to be your chronological age.
Which is so cool.
Yeah. So today we have with us Leslie Bonci. She is someone I have known for a fair amount of time, and she is just an amazing person, dietitian, and I'm only going to read a fraction of her bio. She has so much on it because she's done so much. Leslie has a master in public health. She's a registered dietitian, board certified specialist in sports dietetics, and is the owner of Active Eating Advice, Be Fit, Fed, and Fearless. She also was the sports nutrition consultant for the 2020, 2023, and 2024 Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs.
I love that.
And she runs a private nutrition counseling practice specializing in performance nutrition, weight management, and body composition optimization, disordered eating, and digestive disorders.
So I am ready to learn.
She's authored several books. She's a nationally and internationally recognized speaker and speaks on everything from living swell, combating misinformation, the winning plate, and fuels of engagement. And today, she's going to provide us with insights and nutrition guidance on healthful aging. So we are excited to have you today, Leslie. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And what a wonderful introduction. And, you know, we're talking about things, as you said, Tammy, is pay taxes and, you know, be able to live longer. We got to do both of those things. So I think we should use that financial analogy and talk about the investment in our health, right? Because nobody else can do that for us. We are our own IRA. And so we need to be able to put something into it to glean the benefits out of it.
That's a great analogy. And I guess we'll just start right off the bat with maybe a little information on how you first got interested in this area, Leslie, and counseling people on healthful aging.
Well, I've been a dietitian since 1982. So we do the math, that's a long time. And so, you know, this is personal interest as well as really trying to help the people that I work with. Everybody that I work with is also aging. My parents, dealing with their health issues that they had, and just realizing that we don't want to end up infirm, or we don't want to be invalids. We want to be hale. We don't want to be frail. And so it's always been something that has been dear in my mind, near and the top of my mind. And then the other thing I will say is having had the opportunity to travel to Southeast Asia a lot for work and looking at people that are living with vitality, that whole idea of living swell. I need to do that for myself, right? And be the walking floor model for what that looks like.
I'm hoping that some of what we learned today, too, is also about attitude, because I have something to share about my grandmother. She would always say, you know, I feel like I'm around 30 years old, except when I look in the mirror. So she always had the best attitude about things. But because of your expertise and your insights, what are some of the key differences you see in the body with aging? So we kind of have that overview picture.
Yes. So one of the things we think about what might be happening that we see externally. So one of the things that we see sometimes is how our body shifts, or in other words, we talk about that that fat in the middle. It's like, oh, what is that muffin top, tire, marshmallow, whatever it is we want to call it, because that's one of the things that definitely can happen, and we see it. Another thing is kind of those aches and pains. Where did that come from? And it wasn't there before. And then the dreaded brain fog. I dealt with this with my husband this morning, is where are my car keys? I said, let's not start with that early today. All these things that happen. It's like, why isn't this functioning the way that it's supposed to? And we're not going to prevent it entirely, but we can certainly delay that progression of with the way that we eat. The other thing that I think becomes very, very apparent is as we get older is what happens with our gastrointestinal tract. Oh, all of a sudden, we don't feel as comfortable when we eat, a little bit more reflux or indigestion. Sometimes it feels like things are taking too long to empty, or our bowels don't work the way that they should. And that is all incredibly annoying. And we might not sleep as well for whatever reason that is, up in the middle of the night when we never had that before. So how we eat definitely has an impact on, or our chews have an impact on our snooze, right? It just needs to be that way.
Yes.
Oh, and you mentioned your husband losing his keys. I think losing my phone is a daily activity for me. Yeah. Any special tips with the brain fog part of it, eating wise or exercise wise, that you'd recommend?
Things is, first of all, talk about the exercise first, is when we move, it's not just something that affects us from the neck down, it also affects neck up. Why? Because when you exercise, you are dilating the arteries throughout the body, which means you're delivering more oxygen. So some of that goes up, not just down. So critically important. And it also gives us something different to focus on. I'm thinking about my walking. I'm looking at the trees or the mountains or the whatever when I am walking, or I'm paying attention to the instructor, whether I'm taking a class or I'm doing some kind of an exercise equipment at home. So that is critically important for our brain health. From the standpoint of eating, I think people forget that brains need to be fueled, just like the rest of the body. It's not April Fool's Day, it's April Fuel's Day. Every single day we need to.
Amen.
So, first of all, you need to hydrate. Why? Because this is in a liquid medium. If we do not consume enough fluid, that's one of the things that can make us feel out of focus and out of kilter all the way around. Secondly, we can't be short changing ourselves in terms of nutrients. And sometimes this happens as we get older. Maybe we don't have an appetite. Maybe all of a sudden we're the only one in our house and there's nobody to cook for anymore and we just don't feel like it. Or we have underlying health issues that kind of take our appetite away. But we have to do this in order to nourish the brain. And then there are some very specific things that have been looked at. One of those is ensuring that we get enough choline. Choline is a B vitamin, and one of the primary sources of that is egg yolk. So every time I talk with patients, hey, I throw the yolk away. Don't do that anymore. We need to eat that because it's important for the brain. And also making sure that we're having foods that have the omega-3s in them, and specifically looking at oily fish. So that's the acronym SMASH: salmon, mackerel, anchovy, sardine, and herring.
Oh,
Is
cool.
eating more of those foods actually help to keep our brain intact.
Smash. I like that.
Wow, that's cool. And I bet, because you said one of the first things to do to address that is you probably have your 16 ounces of water before you even consume anything for breakfast, right?
You know what? Because if we think about this for all of us of how much fluid we need, and I work with athletes, so their needs are higher because they're sweating every single day. But it for women, it's typically about 90 ounces of fluid a
Wow.
day, minimally. That is not teeny amount. So, oh, I have a water bottle. Yes, but did you drink from it? Because you don't get points if you're just carrying it around to drink it. So when we think about that, is bookending the day. I'm going to have something when I first wake up. I'm brushing my teeth and I'm having fluid. I'm
That's
having
awesome.
fluid as part of every eating occasion, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and something between, so that we're not uploading the day where we have little, and then try and drink close to a gallon at nighttime. Then you will not sleep well. So it's not just the fluid, but how we drink that fluid over the day and making that a habit. If we're not used to drinking, keep it in sight so you see it. Sometimes people will fill a big container and their goal is by the end of the day, it needs to be done. Some people find it very daunting to drink a lot at once. So how about one of those little cups? And you just keep refilling that cup.
Sipping
That
it.
also gives you some movement. I have to go to the refrigerator and get the water,
Right.
so you're accomplishing two things simultaneously.
Well, and I'm definitely wanting to also learn about muscle mass. We know that we start losing it. I think you made reference to that earlier, Tammy, when we hit 30. So how do we battle that? How do we fight the loss of the muscle mass?
Yes, and so first and foremost, we need to be getting enough protein. So we have to be a pro. That's not a professional athlete. That is making sure that we are including enough protein daily. Now, there are a lot of different recommendations that are out there, but the base recommendations are probably too low for most people. And interestingly, as we get older, sometimes we need more than we
Mm.
need when we are younger. So when we talk about protein foods, what are we talking about? We're talking about dairy foods, milk, yogurt, cheese, cottage cheese, all terrific sources of protein. We're talking about eggs. Both the yolk and the white have protein in them. We're talking about something like a red meat. So it could be beef, veal, pork, lamb. It could be poultry, chicken, turkey. It could be fish and shellfish. It can also be soy foods, something like the edamame, the soybean, or tofu or soy milk, and then the beans themselves. So beans, lentils, peas are all in that category. Vegetables have protein. Grains have protein, nuts and seeds have protein. That gives us a lot of things to choose from. The only things that don't provide protein, one, fat is fruit, no protein, and fat, like oil, not a source of protein, or even like the beloved avocados. Everybody loves them. That's not a source of protein. You get fat in a protein, but in an avocado, but you're not getting the protein. Second thing is that we want to make sure that we have protein as part of every meal. And this is what a lot of people don't do. And specifically, as we get older, we find that breakfast tends to not have enough protein in it. Lunch, it really depends. And then maybe a dinner. So no, that doesn't work. In the ideal, it is breakfast, lunch, dinner have the same amount of protein. So
Mm.
instead of just having a piece of toast at breakfast, could we do a piece of toast and have some cottage cheese with it? Could we do that? If people really love avocado, have at it. Put some cheese with the avocado. Add some egg to the avocado so you're putting the protein that's there. If somebody says, well, for lunch, I'm just doing a salad, A plus for the produce, but for the protein. So can I add some beans to my salad? Could I add a can of tuna to my salad? So it doesn't have to be something that has to be a big production, but it needs to be there. And then, so it's not just dinner time, it is throughout the day. And why? Because people who tend to divide their protein more evenly over the day are going to be less in protein breakdown mode. So they do a better job of muscle preservation. So it isn't always about I have to gain muscle, but I want to hold on to the muscle I have, not just for the sake of the muscle itself, but because that's skeletal muscle and that impacts bone health. So it's critically important to do that.
I like that equal distribution throughout the day of the protein.
Yeah, it was just making me think of this large tub of cottage cheese I just bought. And cottage cheese has had a real resurgence, and that would be a great breakfast food with some pineapple, I think.
Yes.
And I know
You
you
know
were
what I do with it, Tammy, is I'll actually take the cottage cheese and mix it with grape tomatoes and a little bit of pesto on it. So
Oh,
it's deconstructed caprese, but that makes it savory instead of sweet. And that's easy to do something like.
I have a new thing to try. That sounds
Yes,
great.
that
That
was
sounds
really
really good. And I know you were mentioning dairy, so my next question is really on bone mass because that's something too we have to be careful of as we get older. Tips that you have on exercise and nutrition related to helping to maintain that bone mass, and can you do it through food alone?
Um, No, we cannot. We shouldn't be doing it through food alone because one of the things that we try and do it is the impact of the skeletal muscle as it contracts against the bone gives the bone that stimuli to actually stay healthy instead of break down. So that's why resistance training, however we define that, is critically important. What that doesn't mean is, oh, I'm pushing myself away from the table. Not that kind of resistance. So, if somebody says some people use the bands, the resistance bands, some people actually do free weights, some people do machines. I've become a big gym devotee. I'm not a bro, but I'm there a couple times a week because it is critically important to do that. And I'm not doing that because I want to compete in some kind of a fitness contest. I'm doing that because I want to keep my bones intact and I want to be able to live in my own home 25 years from now, I would love that to be the case. So yes, we have to do that. And then in addition to that, when we think about cardio activity, so anything that's foot strikes against the ground, if I'm walking, if I'm dancing, if I'm walking the golf course, these types of things are also really, really helpful for providing that good force and stimulus to the bone. When it comes to eating, a lot of time people think the most important thing is calcium. It is important, but the most important thing is getting enough protein. Because if somebody says, I'm taking a lot of calcium supplement, but I don't eat any protein, we're filling the bone halfway. So we really have to do that, is getting the protein. And as I said, it's part of every meal, yes. But in addition to that, foods that provide dual duty, can I have protein foods with calcium? Yes, that is the beauty of dairy foods, is it's a 2-for-1. We love that. We know that vitamin D is critically important, and it's not always possible to get enough of that through food. So sometimes people will use supplements to help bone health. Another food that can be really helpful for the bone is prunes. There's some very interesting research on prunes, and even in women that are going through menopause and their Z-score indicates that they are osteoporotic or already having issues with the bone health. In some cases, that has reversed. So they don't see progression of the osteoporosis by including in the prunes. I use them every single day. My mom had osteoporosis. I have osteopenia. So we're kind of on the cusp and trying to prevent that from happening. And they're just such an easy add-in and a sweeter, savory application into the yogurt, into the smoothies, even with that cottage cheese. I am telling you, they work. And I love prunes with Brussels sprout, a little bit of walnuts and harissa. Awesome. Just awesome.
I had not heard that before, so that is really fascinating. And living in a climate here in Arizona where we get a lot of sun, everybody thinks they're getting their vitamin D from the sun, but I don't think everybody realizes if you have sunscreen on, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Making sure we're getting some of that from the food, and also from prunes, having that in the mix too to help maintain bone health.
Right.
That's really fascinating.
And you will get vitamin D2 from eggs, and we're
milk.
getting our protein and milk. So,
And the other,
it's a good combo.
Important one is vitamin K. And so leafy greens as providing vitamin K, and they're good for us because they're also good for our mind. So I love things that are a 2-for-2, and also have the vitamin K in them too. So we don't get that in a lot of foods, and it's not just let me run and buy a supplement. No, let me get more benefit because I'm eating the food that has the macronutrients in it, such as the protein, the carbohydrate, the fiber, fat, but it also has the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals that are critically important for optimizing bone health.
You've already talked a lot about exercise, but are there specific strategies or types or the role that exercise plays for keeping us healthy and young, even as we're aging? You've talked about the balanced protein amounts per each meal. Is there a balance dynamic when it comes to the exercise as well?
Yeah, and I'll say that a little differently because some people don't like the word exercise. It's the E word. Don't like it. So maybe it's movement, right? Or maybe it's something like, here's an activity break. I'm doing that. Just as we talk to children, right? Time to get up and move a little bit so we're not sitting in the chair all the time. Exercise can be a great way to have social activities, right? It can, is I'm exercising with other people or going for a walk with somebody or playing golf with somebody or taking a class. So that can be a wonderful thing. So when we look at the mix of exercise, it ideally is 3 or 4 different components. One of those being the resistance training. So how often is it recommended that people do strength or resistance training? 2 to 3 times a week. It doesn't have to be more than that, and it doesn't have to be for hours. And if you've never done it before, you start with light weights, and ideally you might work with somebody initially because the last thing you want to do is get hurt. We don't want that. So nobody should be throwing a tire across the room if you've never done that before. Not a good idea. The second component is looking at cardio activity. So if we are walking, if we are running, if we are on the elliptical, if we are biking, all these types of things, they're great to do and they're fun to do. And then the third one would be looking at something what we call more interval training. So if somebody's on a machine, be it a rower or a bike or elliptical or treadmill, that it's not just steady state the entire time, that over the course of the time you're on it, you push it a little bit more. So, if somebody says I would walk a 14-minute mile, well, maybe you push it up, push the resistance up a little bit or push the speed up so it makes you go a little bit faster. That can also help. And last, and probably the most important one, stretching. We lose flexibility as we get older. So some people feel like they're the Tin Man, it's kind of walking around as what's going on there. We've got to stretch, because if we don't, we definitely lose that ability. Strength training will not increase your flexibility. Cardio does not increase your flexibility. That is the dedicated time to do something like yoga or Pilates, Tai Chi, or any other stretching thing, which also helps with balance.
And balance is a big issue too. And I know the more your muscle mass is intact, the more that helps you with your balance. I love that you have so many different types of exercise you're recommending. And, in talking with someone the other day, they said, I really want to make sure I'm always getting a variety of exercises and maintaining as much muscle mass as possible, just to do things like lift groceries out of the car or lift up my dog, or, lift the dog food and be able to put it away, and just common everyday tasks that may require a little more muscle. But if you don't have that regular exercise, then you may not have enough strength to do it. And
right, or if you're in Pittsburgh, the rock salt in the wintertime with the snow. So, or wanting to pick up a grandchild. I mean, or get down on the floor with a grandchild and be able to play and not feel like I've fallen and I can't get up. I'm just active grandma.
You don't want to make that commercial, no. But, I was reading a little bit about creatine the other day. And I thought it was fascinating. And if you could you explain to our listeners a little bit about what creatine is, and does it really work? Can it help you?
So creatine, first of all, it is produced in our body, in our pancreas, in the liver, and in the kidneys. We call it a metabolite of protein. So it's not exactly a protein per se, but creatine is part of the cycle that when we are doing some immediate physical activity like lifting or having to run very quickly to do whatever that's when we use creatine as a very, very quick energy source. However, there's been some fascinating research on creatine use primarily in those with neurodegenerative diseases. That's actually where the research started. And then it kind of evolved into athletes that were interested in taking it to help to grow muscle. Creatine can be like the appetizer for growing muscle, if not the entree. The entree comes from the protein itself. And now there are some fascinating studies that are looking at creatine, especially in those that have had traumatic brain injury as part of treatment in concussion protocols using it. So there could be some application, but some caveats. It's not inexpensive, and this is not a replacement for other things. I have creatine instead of chicken. No, it doesn't work that way. Or I'll put creatine in my smoothie and then I don't really need to have any protein. No, it is something we gotta do all the bases first, check off all those boxes, and then we could consider using it, and maybe it'll be beneficial. But the other thing about creatine to be aware of is some people are very responsive to, and some people not at all. So this is why I want to make sure everybody's doing everything else that they should be doing first before they think about creatine. Creatine will not correct a diet that's not giving what it should.
So there are some chronic diseases that emerge with age. Maybe you should list some of those, and then what type of, and can a lifestyle that you're describing and have been describing for the last 25 minutes prevent that because of healthy eating, diet, exercise?
So there are a couple things about diet. Is one, for some people, it might delay progression of, so that can be very positive. For others, they might find that it helped to control the symptoms that they have, and that's critically important. Curative, no, but helping the process, absolutely yes. And so some of the things that tend to become more prevalent with age, various types of cardiovascular disease, whether we're talking stroke, whether we're talking about cardiovascular disease itself, so elevated cholesterol, those types of things we see more often. Sometimes we will see blood glucose going up. That's not to say that people younger than 60 are not having diabetes. They are, but we tend to see more of it as we get older. We tend to see more age-related macular degeneration. We tend to see more of the cognitive issues. We certainly tend to see more of the bone issues, be it osteopenia or osteoporosis, and sarcopenia, which is that loss of muscle that can almost 100% be prevented by ensuring that we are moving and we are getting in enough protein. So the positives of all of these is, does eating make a difference? It does. And that's been demonstrated time and time again with various types of diets. I would say it's really an eating lifestyle more than a diet per se. So the DASH diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, the portfolio diet, which has been very helpful for people to lower their cholesterol level, the MIND diet, which really is a compendium and compilation of Mediterranean style and others, and having an impact on cognitive function with the focus more on what to eat rather than the list, choose and avoid. Because after all the years of being a dietitian, anytime we give people the list, what happens? They look at that list of avoid, everything I like is on that list, and then they're frowning and they're not listening. So we don't focus on it that way. We focus more on the what's in it for me and why should I try.
Oh, that's excellent.
That's great. Well, you've given us so much information. If you could summarize it into a few key points for our audience, what would be your top three?
So I think the top three would be: one, hydration never takes a vacation. Right? We need to consume enough fluid as part of every meal, and realize that we also get fluid within fruits and vegetables. If we have soup, stew, chili, those are liquidy foods, so that's part of that total for the day. Number two is think about the composition of the plate. It's more what's on it than what's not on it. Am I having some protein as part of every meal? Am I having some produce as part of every meal? It doesn't mean you have to have vegetable for breakfast, but we certainly could do fruit in some way, shape, or form. This is the beauty of a smoothie. Everything can go in there. And then some kind of grain as part of every meal. If we're doing oatmeal, if we're going to do something like a pasta, if we're doing a whole grain bread, or even something like a rice or a potato, that is important. And third, sit down, relax, chew, eat, savor. And that is then we really get the benefit out of the food that we eat, and preferably we do it with somebody else, because there's so much to be said for that social aspect and that wonderful enjoyment of breaking bread.
That's fantastic. You have given us so much information. I know our listeners are going to want to listen to this podcast a couple times.
Right.
To make sure they've gotten everything. Thank you so much, Leslie, for taking the time and being with us today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you both for having me.
Thank you.